Rick Harrison finally speaks out and names the 5 worst workers who have ever worked at his famous gold and silver pawn shop, and the truth is scarier than any old artifact they've ever fought over. Rick shows the drama that fans never saw on TV, from family betrayals to fights in the back room. The shop almost lost millions of dollars because of a lazy streak in one worker, and rivals were caught by another worker. Rick, did he just put his own son's name on this list? Watch to find out who made Rick Harrison's list of the worst Pawn Stars workers. Harrison from Big Hoss. The first person we talk about is Corey Harrison, who goes by the name Big Hoss. In a strange twist, Big Hoss is Rick Harrison's son, but Rick has had a bad experience with him at work for different reasons. Corey started working at the gold and silver pawn shop when he was 9 years old, and worked his way up until he was in charge of running the day-to-day business. He is now in charge of about 30 workers and makes decisions about what to buy and how much to stock. Besides that, he buys more things than the other group members. For as long as Pawn Stars was on, quickly became the shop's frontline worker, mostly meeting customers, negotiating deals, and making decisions about big purchases. Rick usually took care of bigger or more important things, but this made things difficult between Rick and Corey over time, leading to shockingly big fights. Things started to go badly between Corey and his father around season 6. Corey wanted a 10% part in the business if his father wanted him to stay with the shop for good. This wasn't a surprise since Corey was helping his dad out a lot and is supposed to take over the pawn shop. To fight back, Rick only had 5% power because he wasn't ready to give up so much. Corey finally took this deal, hoping that it would go up later. Even so, Wamu says so. Hen Richard Benjamin Harrison, Rick's father and Corey's grandpa, died. He made it clear that Corey would not be getting any of his estate. Instead, Rick was the only one who owned it. This made things worse between the dad and the kid, and Corey became one of his worst Pawn Stars workers. Rick was always picking on his son, which made things worse between him and Corey, who already had a bad relationship. Questioned Corey's buying decisions on more than one show because Corey sometimes bought things without asking him or bought things that were too expensive for him. In the Sink or Sell show, Corey bought a boat, even though Rick doesn't allow people to buy boats by themselves. Then in Hot Air Buffoon, Corey bought a hot air balloon for $38,000, even though Rick has to approve all purchases over $10,000. There were many more times when Rick told Corey he was being foolish or overpaying, but Corey kept pushing back, trying to show that he could run the business on his own. Rick never really let him run the business, and Corey threatened to leave the shop for good many times until he got more ownership. Fans of the show even said that Corey sometimes looked sad on it. Rick and Chumlee even went to Disneyland without Corey one time, which shows how badly things had gone between them. Plus, Rick Harrison thinks Corey is one of his worst workers because he's been in a lot of problems. In 2011, Corey was arrested at Murray's Saloon for pushing a constable and a security guard during a fight at the bar. He was freed the next day after getting sober, though. But this wasn't the only time Corey did something wrong while drunk. Again, he was caught driving drunk in Las Vegas in 2023. He failed all of his tests to see if he was sober, and he had to sleep in jail or else. Corey also has bad luck with getting married. She was his high school sweetheart, and they got married in 2009, but by 2015, they were no longer together. He got married a second time to Karina Kiki Harrison in 2017, but they split up a year later while their son was still young. Richard owned 49% of the pawn shop, which finally turned into the shop we see on Pawn Stars, while she owned 51% from the start. Joanne Harrison was very important to the business, but she never showed up on Pawn Stars. She helped open the gold and silver pawn shop. Along with that, she owned other companies that were related, such as Harrison Properties in Jorick, which she owned completely. Rick got along well with his mother, but they still did business together. But everything changed when she worked for Rick Harrison on Pawn Stars and became one of his worst workers. In 2018, Richard Harrison died. His whole fortune was left to Rick Harrison to take care of. By 2022, Joanne Harrison had sued her son Rick and the other people and businesses involved, such as the Cash Shop. They should not be together because they are bad together. Joanne says that she was forced to sign over her 51% ownership share between 2000 and 2001 when she was still getting better from a coma. Besides that, she said she didn't know what she could sign. Rick refused to show clear proof of his finances, including about $500,000 in silver, according to Joanne, and cash worth $100,000 that her late husband had saved up before he died. That changed in 2018 when she got Richard's 49% share. She said Rick cut her monthly payments from $25,000 to $20,000. Then, by 2020, he stopped paying her, leaving her without money even though she had big hospital bills to pay. One of her claims was that they got a $3 million loan by using her property as collateral, but she didn't know about it or give permission for it. When she asked for a temporary restraining order in March 2022 to stop Rick from changing her distribution payments again, things got worse. Her lawyer said that she would be in immediate danger of medical harm if the payments were stopped again, and given her age, stopping her payments could be dangerous. Rick was shocked by the case and told everyone that he didn't know about it or the restraining order until they were in the news. He also said the reports were not true and was worried that his mother was being manipulated by people who do not care about her best interests. He told his spokesman that he had been trying to get in touch with his mother but couldn't. For Rick, this case was a huge blow because he thought his mother had betrayed him. This has made things bad between her and her father, making her one of his worst workers. The claim is still going on, and no one knows how it will end. This is still a tough case between them. But Rick has a shocking problem with Austin Chumlee Russell, who works for Chumlee and is Corey's best friend. Many Pawn Stars fans know Austin Lee Russell as Chumlee. He started working at the Las Vegas Gold and Silver Pawn Shop 5 years before Pawn Stars started in 2009. He's been friends with Corey since they were kids and started out working behind the counter, trying items, loading goods, and writing tickets for things that were bought. On the show, Chumlee was mostly the comic relief. Because he messed up so often and got into small trouble, he was often presented as the likable village idiot. He was supposed to be the comic relief, but sometimes he shows real skill, especially when it comes to buying pinball machines, sneakers, video games, and souvenirs. He stood out in shows like Honest Abe and Pinball Wizards. Away from the screen, he opened Chumlee's Candy on the BLVD and offered novelty candies, jerky, toothpicks, and branded food and drinks. In the world of Pawn Stars, his fame made him a valuable character. Even with all of these things, Chumlee is still one of Rick Harrison's worst workers on Pawn Stars. Chumlee is liked by many, but Rick doesn't like how he works or acts professionally. That's because Chumlee doesn't do much when the cameras aren't running. He often doesn't show up to work during normal business hours because he puts the S. It's no surprise that Rick, who really cares about his shop, doesn't like this. Rick is a very serious guy, so the fact that Chumlee is always messing around on the show makes him very mad. Rick thought that Chumlee's attention and pay as a star were hurting the business. Many of his friends have said that he always did a sloppy job, which Rick thought was funny. This made him one of the worst workers on the show over time. Who needs a worker who doesn't do their job well, right? Another reason why Chumlee is one of the worst workers on the show is the big scandal he was a part of, which made Rick Harrison finally give up. In March 2016, Las Vegas police searched Chumlee's home as part of an unrelated investigation into a sexual attack. This caused the most controversy surrounding him. They found methamphetamine, traces of it, and one gun. Many of the guns were not registered. During the raid, they even found a chum chum room with a stripper pole and pair. At first, he was charged with 19 felonies and 1 criminal weaponry charge. Even though Chumlee wasn't charged in the case, he took a plea deal and was found guilty of illegal gun possession and attempted gun possession. A lesser crime, he was given 3 years of probation and had to go to counseling, and gave up his sit and guns. The felony sentence was thrown out when the case was over in 2019. He told them that he didn't know the specifics or what Chumlee was up to behind the scenes, but that they would back him up. Even though he said this, there's no question that this scandal made him angry, especially since it was bad for the shop and the show. The scandal broke out when the show was at its most famous, but Rick didn't fire him. He was still on the show, even though he was one of the worst workers. This is more than we can say about the next worker who was rude to Rick, Olivia Blah. Olivia Black was another worker that Rick thought was one of the worst, especially since she made the show worse. Olivia was hired as a night shift clerk in season 5 and taught by Chumlee. Her real name is Dean Nicole Acero, but she also goes by the name Bella Donna. She was in about 13 shows altogether, taking care of customers, testing things, and selling tickets during the graveyard ship. She and Rick never had any problems on TV, and people liked her for how nice she was and how hard she worked. Later, Rick Harrison said that he didn't really fire her. She quit the show because of a shocking story. The National Enquirer first showed pictures of Olivia when she was a Suicide Girls naked model in the past. She posed under the name Belladonna. Her coworkers, including Rick, knew that she had been a model in the past, but the directors didn't want that to be a part of the show's image. They fired her because of this. Olivia posed for Suicide Girls again 4 days after she was fired. After working behind the counter while not being on the show, she also left the store without being seen on TV. Olivia and Rick had a fight over this because Olivia thought the production team shouldn't have fired her. She did come to work at the pawn shop, not on the show. Rick, however, said that the production company fired her, not him. He said that her private life was her own business and that everyone liked her in the shop. He stood up for her, but he didn't try to keep her or go against the production team. Olivia thought about going to court against Left Field Pictures and said that her firing was unfair. She also said that guys in the same role as women who have nude or suggestive backgrounds are looked at less closely than women in the same role. She also said that the production team didn't have the right to kick her off the show because, see, she was hired to work in the shop, not as a star. She tried to get her job back, but the producers wouldn't listen to her. She had to leave the show in the end because she was bad for the Sai. The scandal made Rick and his friends very unhappy. A lot of people thought that firing her was unfair. They were angry that the show decided to fire her because of something they saw as hurting the show's image. There were many angry posts and requests on social media. There were also fans who said she was one of the best things about some shows and didn't get why Rick didn't fight harder for her to stay on the show. Still, she didn't have as many big fights with Rick as Corey and Chumley did. She worked as a cosplayer, Twitch streamer, and director after the show was over as an alternative model and an advocate for LGBTQ rights. She and her partner, Chef Maria Plaza, also started a site about living a sucked, happy life. After Olivia left, Rick never said anything about her, but he did have a problem with one of the workers at the pawn shop. That worker was the security guard, John Antoine Andy Austin. At 6 feet 5 inches tall, Antoine Austin, who went by the name Andy, was the security guard for the gold and silver pawn shop. He was mostly seen in the background, but he did important things like meeting customers, escorting rude customers out of the store, helping move big things, and selling shop-branded t-shirts when needed. Antoine really stood out in the 4th season episode Teacher's Pet, where Rick said that Antoine had worked at the shop for 3 years. Chumley taught him how to properly bargain for prices and spot real gold in that show. Then, when Chumley filled in at the door during the security episode, Antoine taught her too. In a different episode of Flight of the Pythons, Andy tried to calm down a seller who was angry when Rick told them that their figure was a fake. He stepped in to make things better and was a big part of the show, but Andy quickly became one of the worst workers at Pawn Stars because he kept trying to do much at work. He was meant to be working on security from the background, but he often had disagreements with Rick about his job and goals. Andy kept trying to take on more duties than just security. For example, he was always trying to learn how to bargain for prices and spot real gold. But Rick didn't want to give him any other jobs besides security, and that made things very tense between them. Andy didn't want to stay as a security guard, but Rick wanted to keep him that way. A lot of the time, Andy was seen trying to move up in the company and not being content with his guard job. Most of the time, though, Rick had to make it clear to him that he was his employee and not one of the main ones at the pawn shop. However, Andy was never fired or demoted from his job and kept working as a security guard even though Rick didn't like him. Even though Rick was getting less and less happy with Andy, the security guard is still a fan favorite. The video of his protection detail was seen by almost 1 million people. Richard Harrison, who has since died, once said that Antoine was every mellow. Still, I would never want to cross him. Fans say Andy is still working at the show, even though he was fired. It would have been in every news story. It's not that Antoine is a famous person, but the biggest problem he had with Rick Harrison was that Harrison kept trying to play above his station. One could say that Rick's problems with his workers came from the fact that he was too strict. Rick and his son Corey don't get along well because Rick is always trying to control Corey and how he runs the business. He also has problems with his mother because he tries to manage her money too much, which causes a big scandal. He also doesn't want Andy to do any more work in the shop and only wants him to do his security job. Which part-time worker at Pawn Stars do you like best, and which do you dislike? Are you sure Rick is being fair, or is he also a part of the problem? Type your ideas in the box below. Don't forget to share, like, and like too.